Infrastructure Committee. Jake Auchincloss is also on the House Financial Services Committee. Congressman, thank you for taking time. Let's pick up where Aisha and your colleague, Congresswoman Malliotakis, left off. 9.1% inflation. It's not getting better. And now you have Democrats like Joe Manchin saying that he's not on board with tax increases and more spending on climate change until he sees essentially inflation come down. Your reaction to what's happening with Build Back Better in Congress right now?
Thanks for having me on. Inflation's still too high. There are glimmers of good news. Gas prices have gone down for 30 days in a row. But we clearly need to be addressing areas where we've got strong control domestically, the president and Congress. One of them is health care. Democrats in Congress and the president lowered health care premiums for tens of millions of Americans in our first couple months in office, and are working to extend those premium subsidies as well as empowering Medicare to negotiate drug prices. Not a single Republican in the House or Senate wants to join us in that initiative to lower health care costs for Americans. My question is, why not?
You know, Congressman, you raised such an interesting point because Manchin has essentially said, I'm not on board with climate, I'm not on board with tax increases, but I am on board with Medicare prescription drug prices. Do you think then that if indeed Manchin were willing to narrow things down and Leader Schumer and Speaker Pelosi could narrow down just a prescription drug bill, you would support that and that would actually pass?
It exemplifies that Democrats are absolutely united that Medicare should be able to negotiate drug prices and that we need to help middle class and working class Americans afford health care insurance. Health care is the sector that the president and Congress have the most control over when it comes to costs for everyday Americans, and we've seen the least inflation in the health care sector of all the principal domains. And the question I have is, why has not a single Republican joined in those efforts to lower health care costs for Americans? It's a repeat of 2017's attempt to try to repeal the Affordable Care Act, and then again during the pandemic trying to kick Americans off of health insurance.
It's an interesting point. Although Democrats are in control of both the House and the Senate, they set the table. Let me switch gears because you mentioned the gas prices coming down. It's about $4.55, down from $5, but clearly too high for Americans, hitting Americans in the pocketbook across the country. The president coming back from the Saudi Arabia trip, which has been pretty much the fist bump seen around the world, has gotten the most headlines. But do you believe that the president has any takeaways? Was there anything that he's bringing home? Because as you heard there in the opening, the Saudis are not going to increase oil output.
The Saudis are an important regional player in security. The previous president withdrew the United States from the JCPOA alone and without a plan. This president inherited that regional instability. By going to Saudi Arabia, he is further integrating Israel into better partnerships with its Arab neighbors. And we've seen that with Saudi's commitment to allow Israeli planes to fly over their airspace. That's an important step forward in normalizing relations. And we've seen more tight-knit collaboration on defending against Iran, both its attempts to acquire a nuclear weapon as well as its funding of proxy terror groups.
But
this was an important step forward for Israel's security.
The fist bump that we saw, even the editor of the Washington Post saying that he is appalled by it because of the level of intimacy that it shows in BS, that he's essentially gotten the redemption he sought for the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, whom President Biden's own director of national intelligence said was killed in that embassy and cut up with a bone saw. Are you okay with this fist bump?
I agree with Chairman Schiff that I don't want my children to grow up in a country where autocrats who are oil rich the world over have undue influence. But it's extremely rich to hear from my Republican colleagues that they're worried about this president kowtowing to foreign leaders when Donald Trump and his Helsinki performance with the Russian president, Vladimir Putin, was so sycophantic that both Mitt Romney and John McCain, the two previous Republican presidential nominees, considered it a threat to national security. This president inherited a foreign policy disaster from his predecessor, and he's picking up the pieces.
Has he made it any better? I understand the past criticism you want to pivot to, but right now, Then candidate Joe Biden said that he was going to turn Saudi Arabia into a pariah. He was asked about it on this trip yesterday, and he essentially wouldn't answer because now he clearly doesn't, it would appear, consider them a pariah if he's fist bumping everybody in the Crown Prince's delegation, including the Crown Prince himself.
This president told the American people he is going to use every power at his disposal to lower costs, and he is doing so. He's doing so overseas. He's doing so domestically. He's getting no help from the Republican Party. He's getting no help on health care at home. He's getting no help on gas prices overseas. He has also had to handle the Russian invasion of Ukraine. We're talking about one of the world's principal exporters of oil invading one of the world's principal exporters of foodstuffs.
And
those have spiked global commodities.
We are going to talk about that with Ukraine's ambassador to the U.S., Oksana Maripova, a little bit later. Congressman Jake Auchincloss, thanks for coming on and talking to us today.
Good to be on.
All right. Now, tomorrow, Shannon Bream anchors Fox News Sunday. She will have an exclusive interview with